Hi, I'm Christine, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience as an INFP child. So I'm just going to jump in. As a child, I was always very dreamy, very imaginative, and very future oriented still. I was always crafting up these like fantasies of what my life was going to be like when I was older, whether that be my wedding or my dream job or my husband. So I was always very imaginative, and I fantasized a lot about different things. I did a lot of role playing, like in any type of game that I would play would have to do with the imagination and playing a role or doing dress up. Like I used to play like being a spy or, being like a Native American or, just different, like I would love to play and pretend like I lived off the land, or I would be a fairy or something. Just like all these different games that, like kids play. I was always playing them. Like, usually, I would play a lot by myself. I would do a lot of self-play, but I would also play with other kids, and I would initiate, like, imagination games a lot. So, as a kid, I was also very creative. I didn't get into visual art until I was a bit older, in 7th grade, but I remember I used to always ask my INFJ mom, what does this song mean? What does this song mean? And she would tell me, and I would make up my own songs. And so I used to sing to her a lot, all these crazy songs that I would make. And just different things. Like I did a lot of crafts as a kid. My mom was always really great about, giving us creative ways to express ourselves. And so I did a lot of that sort of thing as a kid. As an INFP child, I was always very intelligent, but I wasn't motivated in school, and I think there's a couple of different reasons. I think one, I was held back a year, because back when my INTJ dad was in school, he always had a hard time himself, so he thought that if I was held back a year that I would have an easier time dealing with people. That was not really the case, because I don't feel like I ever really fit in with anybody. I had a very hard time connecting with my peers. And then the other thing I think maybe was that I was diagnosed with ADD. So I had a hard time focusing in school and paying attention. So those are the two things. But just in general, I think a lot of it had to do with being socially awkward. I had very little friends in school. I was kind of messy. My hygiene wasn't very good, and I think that's probably because I had a low self-esteem for being bullied. I was kind of the fat kid, and I didn't really fit in general. I was kind of a tomboy. I didn't want to be a girl, like, at all. Like, pray to God, please don't let me get boobs that bad. Like, I did not identify with girls at all at that age. I very much so identified with boys more. But, I kind of grew out of that. But, I think, in a way, being the uncool tomboy, being bullied and stuff kind of made it hard for me to really be motivated to be at school in general. But I was also very naturally precocious. I was always asking my dad questions, and luckily, my dad's like super intelligent. He's an INTJ, so like just always had answers for me. Even my mom, she tells me the story, like, there was this one time that your dad couldn't answer a question, and I literally cried because he always has the answer to everything. And that's just the kind of person he did. And, you know, he didn't have the answer for everything, but if he didn't have the answer, he always looked it up, and he would always give me an answer. So I think in some ways, you know, I wasn't not intelligent, but school in general never motivated me. I've always been a self-learner. I've always asked questions and looked for the answers to things that naturally are interesting to me. So that's something that's carried over to adulthood. I'm constantly still learning. I didn't really have a good understanding of social protocol going back to school. I kind of skipped over that, but didn't really understand social situations very well or how to make friends. And also, I could not deal with conflict. Going back to being bullied and stuff, I was bullied all the time. I was chased around with glue. I was called names. I was in fights and stuff like that, and I never stood up for myself. However, I did stand up for my family. You know, if any of the people who would bully me picked on my brothers or my sisters, like, I would get into fistfights with them. Like, I didn't so much care about myself, and I think that's partly because of the self-esteem issues, and partly because I don't like conflict. But when people messed with people who I loved, I very much so got really angry and would not tolerate it at all. And so, you know, from a very young age, like, all of the pros and cons of an INFP are very apparent in my childhood, you know. So I'm not going to go really much into those in general, but I mean, because I feel like as a child they manifest themselves in different ways. So I think reading the profile is kind of good enough, I guess. Also, I guess as a child, I was kind of you know, like, with the no conflict thing. I didn't really know how to deal with conflict with my peers. I didn't really know how to deal with conflict at school, and I certainly didn't know how to deal with conflict at home, with my family divorcing and our family breaking up. I was always in the middle of everything, and I wanted everyone to be friends, and I couldn't deal with the fighting. I stayed in my room a lot, and I cried a lot, because I just didn't know how to deal with, I couldn't handle it without being in the middle of it. So, and I had really bad anxiety as a child. You know, I've had problems with anxiety my entire life, so kind of an INFP thing, I think. I think a lot of INFPs have anxiety. Just ridiculous things, like, I would always, you know, think that there's ghosts or aliens and just scary monsters. Like, I couldn't watch scary movies as a child because I was so imaginative that anytime I watched a scary movie, like, that would be the monster under my bed, you know, like, just always afraid. And in fact, I haven't really talked about this much, but I used to, in our old house, we'd all sleep in my parents' bed, and they had this giant king bed, and my mom would, you know, we would get tucked in and whatever, and there was a sliding glass window, and I was so afraid that somebody was going to break into our house or shoot our house up or whatever, that I would sleep in front of the glass window so I could be a meat shield, basically. If something were to go bad, you know, something bad would happen, I would be there, and I would protect my brothers and sisters with my body, because I was kind of a martyr, you know. Like, I used to think as a child, well, I would die for anybody, you know, just any old schmuck off the street, like, I would die for that person, you know. So very, I was the martyr as a child, but I mean, I was also very compassionate and very sweet, you know. I took care of things like animals and stuff like that. I loved my animals. I always had animals. and also, like, just people in general. I think, I loved people as a child, and I would take care of them, and I always wanted the best for them. So, very compassionate and kind of a martyr. So, just stuff like that. I did have anger issues as a child, from the divorce and from the kind of bad marriage that my family had. So I would take it out on my brothers and sisters. I don't do that anymore, of course, but at the time I didn't really know how to express my anger, so it kind of manifested in a more physical way. Not something I'm proud of. Definitely goes against my value system now. But I think it was just a way to deal with something. I didn't know how to deal with it better. But as I grew older, I had more coping mechanisms. So, I mean, that's just kind of my childhood subjectively, and how my childhood relates to the INFP profile. So, I definitely feel like my childhood fits the INFP profile, or vice versa, But anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. Bye!